The stereotype from the adult entertainment industry has always been the coupling of a beautiful young woman and an ugly man with a large asset. If you have ever wondered where this dynamic came from though, look no further than Ron Jeremy.
Son, you wanna see me have Nah, I'm cool.
This old, fat, balding, short, greasy man worked in the industry for nearly 4 decades, and holds the Guinness World Record for performing the most adult films of all time. Not only that, but in the early 2000s, Ron was a recognizable face in Hollywood, appearing in dozens of mainstream movies, news specials, and music videos. So why was this guy the face of the X-rated industry for decades? And what contributed to his downfall once accused by 30 different women of assault so late into his life? Well, as I dug into the long career of Mr. Jeremy, I realized this enigmatic figure has one of the most bizarre stories of anyone I have ever covered on this channel. But to understand how he became the archetype of a creepy male adult actor, we'll first have to go back about 72 years. But before we go any further in today's video, I just want to give a big shout out to today's sponsor, Aura. Did you know that a staggering amount of your personal information is readily available on the internet? From phone numbers to addresses to relatives to social security numbers, there is a lot of stuff out there. And to think your privacy is being violated to a whole slew of individuals, including scammers, spammers, and stalkers. But fortunately, for a very affordable price, Aura is able to assist. Aura protects your privacy by identifying data brokers selling your info. After this, they take care of the hard part, automatically removing all your info from these sites and keeping it off. And while yes, there are other services out there that provide the service, none of them are as comprehensive as Aura. This company is the top of the line because you get alerts if your personal info is found on the dark web. You get real-time fraud alerts for credit and banking, 24/7 monitoring to help keep your identity secure. And the best part is you also get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, and more. And all of this is provided with US-based support around the clock whenever you need it. So to try Aura out for free for the first 14 days, click the link in the description down below. In those 2 weeks, Aura will get to work scrubbing your personal info off the data broker sites. I'm not leaving myself vulnerable, and neither should you, which is why I strongly encourage to at least try out the trial. Ronald Jeremy Hyatt was born on March 12th in 1953 in Queens, New York. He grew up in a middle-class Jewish family with both parents and a brother and sister. His father, Arnold, worked as a physicist and professor at Queens College, and his mother, Sylvia, edited books while raising the children. Before having kids, his mother served in the OSS during World War II, the predecessor of the CIA. With such successful parents, Ron had the basis for a very stable childhood, and in his early years received good grades at school. In addition to being naturally smart, the young boy was the class clown. This, of course, distracted the other students and caused him to be called to the principal's office, where they labeled him the Ron problem. His acting out may have been a response to the situation developing at home. You see, when Ron was in the 3rd grade, his mother was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, a progressive neurological disorder. Ron's father speculated that she may have been put at risk during her time serving as a World War II spy. By the time Ron was in high school, she depended on her family for round-the-clock care. With added stress at home due to his mother's diagnosis, it isn't surprising that Ron felt the need to act out and get attention from teachers and classmates. Noticing their son's love of the spotlight, they encouraged him to get into acting. It wasn't until he attended high school at Benjamin Cardozo that he really discovered his love for the stage. Even with acting occupying most of his time, as well as having a job selling ice cream, he still managed to think about girls. At 12, the young boy had his first kiss with a neighbor named Stephanie. After this initial short-lived romance, he met his first love, Mandy, at 15, who he lost his virginity to. However, Ron admits that he's not sure there was any real penetration since he put the condom on inside out. I'd also like to point out in 2020, Ron started calling Mandy Marjorie, which contrasts from what he claimed in his biography from 2007, but these sorts of slip-ups will make sense later on.
I was 15 years old. The girl's name was Margie.
No, I said, did you cheat on Margie?
Oh, yeah, one time.
Immediately after sleeping together, Mandy stopped seeing Ron, so he moved on with his first official girlfriend, Karen. This would end in disaster as Ron continuously cheated on her with Mandy, with the two having sex in an elementary school after hours. Following some sneaking around, Mandy finally agreed to date Ron officially and he dumped Karen. This relationship wouldn't last much longer either, because when Ron graduated high school early and went to Queens College, the two began to grow apart. It was beyond just a separation, as Mandy began to experiment with LSD and other drugs, which Ron strongly disapproved of. This eventually led the young woman to check herself into rehab. Now single, Ron was a broke college kid with an acting dream and needed to find a way to make some money. This is when he decided to work in the Catskills in upstate New York, a popular vacation spot for Jewish families during the 1960s and 70s. Working as a waiter, Ron would lie to wealthy couples claiming to be going to school to become a doctor to get better tips. Beyond just making some money, Ron attracted women he referred to as borscht bunnies. These were older ladies at the vacation resort whose husbands only visited on the weekends and worked in the city during the week. The wives would often hook up with Ron, sometimes giving him gifts or cash for his services. I believe this is where Ron developed his sex addiction, as well as him seeing intimacy as transactional in nature. Making the most of his summers, and with the help of a supportive family, he didn't need to worry about money and managed to receive degrees in education, special education, and acting.
This is going to also shock you folks. I got a master's in special ed from Queens College. I used to be a teacher.
This landed the young man a job at a special needs school in upstate New York. Ron enjoyed his time working at the school and utilized psychodrama or acting it out as a form of therapy to help his students. But there was something missing from his life, and he continued to pursue acting despite not having success beyond a couple off-Broadway shows. By 1977, Ron was 24 and dating a woman named Allison who also worked in the Catskills. She came up with an interesting idea for the special ed teacher to make some extra money. The young woman suggested that he pose naked and submit the pictures to a magazine called Playgirl. Ron figured why not and let Allison take the photos that would launch the young man's soon-to-be career. The image would end up getting used in the next edition, calling Ron the boy next door. These images impressed the magazine readers due to the enormous size of his wiener. While the young man was happy to have made some money off the photos, there was one small problem. Since he was using his real name, people began to look him up in the phone book, connecting them to his grandmother. Women began to call the number, leaving sexual messages for Ron, causing upset in the Hyatt family. But not in the way you would expect. While most parents probably didn't want their son posing naked for the world to see, Ron's father could care less, though he was furious that he had used the family name and made him promise to never do that again. The adult actor agreed to his father's wishes, feeling that this would be the last time he would ever do something so scandalous anyway. He continued to chase audition after audition for mainstream acting gigs, but had no luck until he became acquainted with a man who shot B-movies. Unfortunately, the role this man would offer Ron was not ideal. The director explained that he didn't shoot mainstream films, but rather those in adult entertainment. At first, the struggling actor was disappointed by the invitation, but realized that this might be his way into Hollywood acting. For this reason alone, Ron agreed to be a performer, hoping to make connections in the mainstream space. This time, however, he would not use his family name, but his first and middle, creating Ron Jeremy. The 25-year-old showed up for his first scene incredibly nervous in 1978. Once there, Ron was disappointed because he didn't have any lines to showcase his acting skills. Instead, he was instructed to shoot with an adult actress named Samantha Fox. It was at this moment that Ron struggled to physically perform, and it was beyond just being intimidated by Miss Fox's sexual prowess. The young man couldn't help but feel that performing in adult movies was a waste, and it was not the way to land his first big movie role. The crew noticed Ron's hesitation and encouraged him to see the fluffer. Before Viagra existed, fluffers were employed to ensure a male performer remained sexually aroused and ready for filming. With the help of the female fluffer, along with the fact that he hadn't relieved himself in a week, Ron impressed the director with his ability to time his release down to the second, as well as producing copious amounts of fluids. Once he was exposed to this level of praise and learned he had a talent for X-rated films, the struggling actor fell in love with the industry. And when the scene came out, Ron's family was surprisingly supportive. While Ron was starting off his career in dirty movies, his brother would go on to study economics at Harvard and become a CEO, and his sister worked as a district attorney. While his father and siblings were open to his career choices, the adult actor admits that he's not sure how much his mother understood his career since her Parkinson's had worsened. In 1979, she passed away just 1 year after Ron entered the adult entertainment business. After her death, Ron threw himself into his work, flying out to California to be a guest on Wheel of Fortune, an episode which appears to be lost media, and to film adult movies. The up-and-coming performer ended up winning a trip to Mexico from the game show, but chose to film adult movies instead, desperately trying to make a name for himself. Luckily, he was performing during a time that would go on to be known as the Golden Age of porn, lasting from 1969 to 1984. This time period would attract positive attention from mainstream cinemas, movie critics, and the general public. These movies had budgets as large as many B-movies and spanned 90 minutes or more, having a true storyline. It was around this time that Ron would get his famous nickname, the Hedgehog. When Mr. Jeremy came to California for the first time in the early 80s, he didn't know much about the state other than what he had seen in media. Due to this, he was under the impression that the entire region was sunny and warm. So in a t-shirt and shorts, he took a motorcycle into the mountains of Northern California, and soon learned how wrong he had been. The temperature dropped quickly and soon became an all-out blizzard. Having no other choice but to keep going, Ron somehow made it to the shoot on time but nearly died of hypothermia. Everyone jumped into action to save the nearly frozen young man, having him strip naked and take a hot shower to restore his body temperature. When he emerged from the steam, his skin had turned an unnatural bright pink. This, in combination with his extensive body hair, led a fellow adult actor to call him a hedgehog. Ron hated the name, but it stuck. Even after the near-death encounter, the star continued to film in California, meeting some of the most notorious names in adult film. Chuck Traynor, who was married to Linda Lovelace and worked on the infamous adult movie Deep Throat, struck up a friendship with Ron. At the time, Traynor had finished his messy divorce with Lovelace, who accused him of abuse, and then went on to marry the popular adult star Marilyn Chambers. Traynor loved inviting Ron over to have intercourse with his wife Marilyn while he watched. While this open relationship worked out great for Ron, landing him more job opportunities, Chambers and Traynor would go on to divorce as well. Through his new connections, Ron started working for more famous names such as Veronica Hart. She became obsessed with a trick that Ron was hesitant to admit to. As it turns out, when Ron was around 12 years old, he attended a Boy Scouts camp, and while trying to tie his shoe, he discovered that he could, put it in his mouth. So enthralled with this new skill, he immediately called his dad and explained the talent. His dad simply told him not to do that in front of anyone and that one day girls would do it for him, calming his son down. Jeremy didn't think of this skill again until he entered the adult film industry and everyone wanted to see. Veronica Hart encouraged Ron to do this act in adult movies and it was a hit, with it becoming Mr. Jeremy's signature move. Despite not wanting to do this act, he did perform it multiple times over the years until he became more rotund in nature. Many people have called Ron's ability gay and wondered if he would perform in homosexual adult films. However, Ron never strayed from heterosexual sex despite being offered a Ferrari to perform a scene with a man. He also credits his abstaining as the reason he never contracted AIDS. While Ron had success in California in his early years, he would always return home to New York City. He was captivated by the streets of the Big Apple, which were flooded with sex clubs and streetwalkers during the late 70s and early 80s. He attended many of these adult establishments, but by far his favorite was a place called Plato's Retreat, which was originally located on the Upper West Side, in the basement of a hotel. The club used to be a gay bathhouse, which became infamous when musician Barry Manilow was seen there. In 1977, a man named Larry Levinson acquired the property and opened it up as a heterosexual swinging club. This popular venue would later have a documentary about it called American Swing, released in 2008, which I might add was an interesting watch during my research. This wasn't just a place with bodies covering the floor all sleeping together. No, Plato's had a disco room, several saunas, jacuzzis, swimming pools with waterfalls, and several private and public rooms. However, none of these amenities were what attracted Ron to the establishment. Instead, it was the endless buffet of food that had him visiting nightly. The thing is, Ron's opinion on the food would be debated in the 2008 film as everyone else viewed it as vile. This is also when his weight gain would begin, but we'll get to that later.
Why are you asking about that horrible food? Jesus.
Since Plato's was a swinging club, Ron was required to bring a woman with him to get access. In his book, he recounts the many rules and unsaid rules in the swinging community. First off, it is extremely important to have equal men and women, or even better, to have more women. Unfortunately, sometimes women would come and not want to be involved with the other men, leading her to be labeled as a ticket. This often threw off the perfect equilibrium of the genders. Even worse was when the couple was not upfront and honest about their intentions. For instance, Ron once brought a date to Plato's and the two began hooking up with another couple. The husband of said couple had sex with Ron's date, but his wife understandably didn't want to sleep with the now overweight Ron. The adult performer found this to be incredibly rude and had the couple kicked out of the club for good. He had this power due to his friendship with the owner, Larry. This eventually gave him the ability to come as a single man. The interesting thing about this club was there were many types of couples attending. Some were married for 20 years and trying something different, and others were adult performers familiar with the free lifestyle. The glamour of the club soon attracted celebrities such as musician Sammy Davis Jr., Richard Dreyfuss, and the cast of Saturday Night Live. Plato's began to even receive mainstream press because Levinson decided to start holding family days at the club where couples could bring their children to the establishment, even letting them swim in the pool that normally had all sorts of bodily fluids flowing throughout. Ron Jeremy claims that the club was clean and family-friendly, but those interviewed for the American Swing documentary seem to paint an entirely different picture.
I see all these men standing around the pool, and they're all off.
You would have maybe 200 bodies in there on a busy night and just writhing together like a bucket of worms.
Beyond that, the club was heading for dark times. Although there isn't any concrete evidence of these claims, many of the people who worked in the club allege that Larry was involved in the mob. All of this was going to catch up with the business owner when one night he was kidnapped for 2 days. When he returned, Larry was beaten severely, needing a wheelchair but acted like everything was fine and never explained what had happened. If that wasn't enough controversy, the IRS became involved, and in 1981, Larry was facing prison time.
In 1 year, I think they claimed only $300 of taxable income and paid zero tax.
Mr. Levinson was sentenced to 8 years in prison, having to abandon his precious business. Being the good friend that he was, Ron would bring girls to Larry for conjugal visits in prison. This helped pass the business owner's time until he was released in 1984, but while he was absent, Plato's had changed.
Because I believe 40% to 50% of the girls there every night with their, quote, date were hookers.
The attendees were no longer couples coming to the club to try new sexual experiences, but rather aggressively sexual single men who had hired their dates. It resulted in no one knowing who was a wife or a prostitute. Another problem was the excessive amounts of drugs entering, specifically cocaine. The 1980s were in full swing. This wasn't something Larry tried to stop, even when he got out of prison, because he was a drug addict himself.
Larry was depressed, and I'd visit him in his apartment in Brooklyn, and he'd be doing crack cocaine. And he's sweating like, Larry, you're sweating like a pig. Doesn't look like you're having fun. He goes, trust me, it's a nice feeling and it takes away the pain.
Rumors of drugs and prostitution attracted the attention of the New York City police force, who sent in undercover agents to investigate, with the business ultimately being shut down.
Tonight, the city closed Plato's Retreat, that notorious heterosexual sex club on Manhattan's West Side.
Even if Plato's hadn't fallen apart for the aforementioned reasons, there would soon be a worldwide catastrophe that would not only destroy the swinging group, but also impact the adult entertainment industry as a whole: AIDS. Through my research, I find it interesting that at no point was the industry completely halted due to the spread of HIV, which resulted in several adult stars becoming infected. Some companies started to enforce the use of condoms, which many performers such as Ron Jeremy despised, but they may be the reason he's alive today. During this turbulent time period, it's unclear how many porn stars were killed by the virus since it was such a taboo topic. For example, famous performer John Holmes contracted the disease but told everyone he had colon cancer to cover up the illness. Through all the dangerous sex Ron was having, he miraculously didn't end up contracting the disease himself. This allowed him to be one of the few who both survived past the 90s and continued to perform. Although the industry didn't shut down for AIDS, the law and mainstream opinion had turned on explicit movie production. The 80s saw a surge in conservatism, and in an effort to combat the spread of the disease, lawmakers cracked down on sex work. Starting in 1982, a Democratic state senator named David Roberti created an anti-pimping law. This applied only to prostitution, and its main purpose was to drive more tourism to NYC. Things all changed when the District Attorney of California believed that the shooting of adult movies fell under these measures, and charged directors with pandering, aka the act of procuring a person for prostitution. In 1983, Hal Freeman was the first director to be arrested for pandering. The community was stunned by this, and Freeman was convicted and sentenced to 5 years probation, 90 days in jail, and a fine of $10,000. This set the precedent for law enforcement to come after all adult companies, both the directors and performers. It wouldn't be long until Ron was in hot water with the law himself. While directing a film, cops broke down the door of the house he had rented in Laurel Canyon, California. Allegedly, when asked if there was any weapons in the house, Ron responded, "The only gun is here in my pants." Unsurprisingly, this didn't go over well, and in 1988, Ron was thrown into prison for the first time, but managed to put up bail while awaiting trial. He didn't even get to his day in court before getting arrested a second time. On this occasion, Ron alleges that the cops interrogated him about his connection to the mob. He claimed and still claims that he knew nothing about organized crime being involved in the adult industry, but detectives were not in a hurry to release him. He was put in prison once again, with his bail being set at a whopping $70,000. Even worse, they placed him with sex offenders, which disgusted Ron. While in prison, he reached out to an old friend, Ralph Papa Thornson, who is a world-famous bounty hunter, and he pulled some strings to get Jeremy out of prison. Understanding that California was no longer safe to film adult movies, he went to Hawaii and Nevada to escape the law, with the FBI monitoring from afar. Ron's charges should have caught up with him, but Hal Freeman managed to protect the industry by taking his case to the Supreme Court in 1988. They ruled that, in order to constitute prostitution, the money or other consideration must be paid for the purpose of sexual arousal or gratification. This essentially meant that because adult actors were paid to act and not for erotic satisfaction, adult movies were, in fact, legal. This didn't mean that the adult industry was entirely out of the woods just yet. New permit laws were put into effect, and the cops placed huge fines on the adult companies for any small infractions. For example, a fire marshal needed to be present during filming, which cost the production $600 a day. This wasn't even necessary for mainstream movies at the time. All of the challenges inflicted on the X-rated community enraged Jeremy, as he believed they were being treated unfairly. As conservative opinions towards sex work continued through the late 80s, he decided to reach out to the mainstream media and debate those who didn't like his work.
I've been in 500 films as an actor and have no subjugation against women, none towards men. Well, you have no S&M in my films, no ropes, tying up, beatings. So what have you got against my movies if you saw any?
The adult performer was the perfect spokesperson to do this, as he had managed to survive the AIDS breakout and never touched drugs or alcohol. Being college educated, he was more well-spoken and sophisticated than his contemporaries. In the late 80s, Ron was still a sought-after performer despite him being in his late 30s and putting on a significant amount of weight.
So there's Ron fucking me and eating a hot dog.
His appearance hadn't stopped him from booking roles in the adult industry, but he had bigger aspirations. He desperately wanted to crack into Hollywood and believed another way would be through comedy. The only problem was Ron wasn't remotely funny. As he says in his book, "I used to be so lonely I wouldn't get dick, let alone pussy. Unlike you guys, I've seen my ass on a wide screen. I have a tattoo on my dick of a bigger dick. My dick is so big, my dick has its own dick." Although people told him his act was terrible, he didn't quit and began hanging around famous comedians such as Jim Carrey, Robin Williams, Andrew Dice Clay, Rodney Dangerfield, and Sam Kinison, to name a few. With these connections, he began to appear on TV shows, breaking into the mainstream setting.
Ron, do me a favor. Show Rodney what a real man looks like. Yeah, okay.
Ron got lucky when he ran into John Bobbitt at a party for Playboy in Las Vegas. For those who don't know, in 1993, a bizarre and shocking story took hold of America involving the Bobbitt couple. John was married to a woman named Lorena, who in the middle of the night cut off his genitals, fled the house, and threw them out of her car window. Paramedics rushed to find John's missing member, and once found, they were able to reattach it. The news sensationalized the trial as Lorena claimed that before this took place, John had emotionally and physically abused her.
Here, John Wayne Bobbitt describe what happened the night his wife cut off his penis.
It was finally determined that John showed a pattern of domestic abuse, and Lorena was found not guilty. Despite being unhappy with the results of the trial, John enjoyed the public spotlight, with tabloids tracking his every move. The burning question on everyone's mind was, what did his penis look like post-surgery, and did it still work? Well, after meeting Ron, John agreed to be in an adult movie to prove that his wiener worked. Jeremy was thrilled with the idea and even more excited that he got to direct. However, there was one huge roadblock to making this explicit movie. John was not a natural performer. In fact, he was unable to keep himself erect, even with all of Ron's secret tricks. This was before Viagra, so Bobbitt had to inject his nether region with a drug called Caverject that causes the muscles to relax and stimulate blood flow. With the usage of the drug, they released John Wayne Bobbitt Uncut in 1994. It essentially was a parody reenactment of Bobbitt's life when his junk was cut off.
I was pretty worried at first. I didn't know if I'd ever be able to, Then an interesting thing happened while I was in the hospital. Interesting. It was almost a miracle.
On the night of the big premiere, John almost missed it because he was convicted of domestic battery for hitting a stripper, but he was released pending appeal. Eventually, he was sentenced to 15 days in jail, but nothing could dampen the outrageous success of the movie. Once it hit the rental stores, more than 80,000 copies were bought in the first few weeks, being the top-selling release of the year. Since there was so much hype around the movie, John knew he needed to drag out the fame for as long as possible to pay for his lavish lifestyle, as well as the hospital and legal bills he had accrued. This is when he came up with the idea to claim he had knocked up his co-star Tiffany Lords while filming the movie. Jeremy admits that the entire thing was a hoax and has no idea how no one picked up on it since Tiffany never once looked pregnant. In 1996, John agreed to another adult movie. He had gotten a penis enlargement surgery after so many people criticized his small length from his debut. The second scene showed off his new girth titled Frankenpenis, about a castrated man who had a super penis sewed onto him in an experiment. Around the same time, Ron recruited a prostitute named Divine Brown to star in his next adult film. Miss Brown had risen to fame after she was caught performing sexual acts to actor Hugh Grant in his BMW. Jeremy inquired if the mom of two would like to play herself in an adult film titled Sunset and Divine, The British Experience. Divine agreed, as at the time she could barely afford to pay her bills, hence why she resorted to prostitution. This production received muted success, and Jeremy realized that the Bobbitt experience had been a once-in-a-lifetime event. By this point in his career, Ron was spending a lot of time in Los Angeles and sought out celebrities by going to various clubs every night. There he would manage to get himself invited to house parties, with him never turning down an invitation. By attending these events, he managed to make introductions to individuals such as Keith Richards, Samuel L. Jackson, and Nancy Sinatra, and Billy Joel. While some celebrities such as Slash embraced the adult actor, others like Christina Aguilera and Lisa Marie Presley snubbed Jeremy because of his career choice. These unique experiences led him to make even more connections with people working in Hollywood. He was a consultant on the movie 9½ Weeks, which is an erotic romantic drama about a woman who experiences bondage for the first time.
Is it called 9½ Seconds?
Likely Jeremy's most notable work occurred when he met director Paul Thomas Anderson at a party. He hired Ron to be a consultant on his 1997 movie Boogie Nights, following an adult performer's life named Dirk Diggler. The acclaimed director even attended adult performance productions to get insight into how these movies were made. Mr. Jeremy was proud of his work on the film, even though the scene with him was cut. His cameos being removed in post-production would become an ongoing problem for Ron. He believed that movie executives refused to allow him to have screen time. Despite this, he somehow appeared in a children's TV show called Bone Chillers in 1996. He went on to appear in several movies over the next few years, although his roles were always small.
No one's gonna help you now, honey!
Somebody save me. Orgasmo.
These acting roles did make Jeremy incredibly recognizable to the average person, resulting in him being referenced on SNL for the first time in 1997.
Look, you know, this porno thing, it's not as much fun as people think, all right? I'm trying to go legit. In fact, I just auditioned for an episode of George and Leo.
This attention led to the making of the documentary The Legend of Ron Jeremy, interviewing family members and getting an inside look at his everyday life.
Hi, Ron!
Everyone wants to be Ron Jeremy. They want his life.
I'm like a Tom Cruise in my business.
I'd also like to note that this movie is not available anywhere online and I had to buy a physical copy of it. While the documentary wasn't exactly a blockbuster success, it did show that people were genuinely interested in the adult performer, and he was becoming a cultural icon. In fact, many celebrities wanted to take pictures with or even hang out with Ron. As these images were released in the tabloids almost every day, other celebrities that wanted attention started to copy the behavior, loving the novelty of being pictured with Jeremy. Many women even asked for the X-rated film star to sign their breasts, which soon caught on and became a gag. He went on to be referenced for a second time on SNL and even played a role on The Dave Chappelle Show.
This isn't the picture phone, but if I could see you, I imagine you looking like Ron Jeremy in the orange suit.
Hey, Ron. So, you want to see me have sex?
Nah, I'm cool.
The mid-2000s seems to be Ron Jeremy's peak in mainstream culture. He appeared in various music videos for artists such as Kid Rock, Moby, and LMFAO, to name a few. This exposure to the music industry allowed him to have a new career opportunity. Not many people know that Jeremy is trained as a classical musician and can play the piano, violin, and unfortunately, the harmonica. With this background, he was able to put his skills to use when he released his own hit single, Freak of the Week, with DJ Polo. With the rise of trashy reality TV shows during this era, Jeremy fit right in, appearing on Surreal Life in 2004 and The Farm in 2005.
And Ron Jeremy, the adult film king.
I own the organ that was in Frank Sinatra's house.
I own the organ that was in many, many movies.
He even appeared on an episode of TLC's Hoarders Buried Alive to help his friend, which is ironic because later it would be revealed that Ron himself was a hoarder. He made an appearance in a Family Guy episode, was referenced a third time on SNL, appeared in an MTV commercial, and had 2 appearances on Robot Chicken. Later, his image was used in a Leisure Suit Larry game. In it, he was dressed as a fairy, wearing a pink tutu and waving a phallic sex toy around like a magic wand while he sang advice to the player. Then in 2008, he appeared in Bone Town, and in 2011, he was the mayor of a town in the game Postal 3. Ron Jeremy had somehow broken into the movie, music, TV, and video game industry, and now was joining the literary world. In 2007, he released a book about himself called The Hardest Working Man in Showbiz. This biography was met with a huge amount of success as it became a New York Times bestseller. As I've read the book myself, I can say it was highly entertaining, but definitely disgusting at times. Beyond the recounting of some extremely explicit stories, Ron leaves different tips in his book of how to keep an erection, avoid an STD, and how to perform sodomy like a pro. I'm something of an anal aficionado, an analingist if you will, and I pride myself on putting even the most inexperienced women at ease.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
In addition, some of his self-described funny stories involving women are just creepy. He, quote, decided to give her a friendly reminder that I was still there and I still had a massive erection that needed some attention. I stood up and began slapping my penis against the girl, just a few light bops on the back of the shoulder, kind of in a humorous way. Very funny, Ron. Beyond this, what really stood out to me in the book was Jeremy's strange love life over the years. As of the completion of the biography in 2007, the then 54-year-old never married and explained his reluctance by breaking down his most serious relationships and why they all failed. By the mid-2000s, Ron claimed to have been sexual with over 4,000 women, but this doesn't mean that none of them developed into romantic partnerships. Jeremy mentions an adult actress named Tanya Lawson, who he considered a live-in partner. All of Jeremy's significant others had to understand that their relationship would only be emotionally monogamous. Tanya was fine with this until one day when she decided to leave the adult industry in the late 80s and wanted Ron to join her. Unfortunately, he was unwilling to make this move, which upset Miss Lawson. She went on to publicly reject the industry, and in Ron's eyes, spew lies about what she encountered in the space. Next came a woman named Veronica, who he refers to as his roommate. They were happy together until Ron learned that Veronica was a prostitute, which upset the adult film star because he viewed this sort of sex work negatively. Following this revelation, he asked her to move out, ending the relationship but not the friendship. Then there was Juniper, a veterinarian assistant. The couple bought a turtle and rat together, having the pets cuddle in bed with them. The rat would end up dying of cancer, which caused Ron to reflect on his life. It was at this moment that he wanted to procreate. Ron and his lady friend decided to try to have children for 6 months, but nothing came of it. Eventually, Juniper left Ron, and she is the last woman he publicly discusses being emotionally tied to. Never once has Jeremy come close to being fully monogamous in a relationship. In fact, many people close to Ron described him as a sex addict, who only loved one thing more, which was shoveling food down his gullet. Jeremy had gained weight starting in the mid-80s, but he continued to balloon outwards as his hairline went inward. The adult performer was too busy to worry about his appearance as he never wanted to miss an opportunity, resulting in a terrible sleep schedule that would catch up to him later in life.
Ron falls asleep sometimes.
It's like narcolepsy, just all of a sudden he'll be sitting there.
With all of this going on, you'd think that Ron would take a step back from filming, but this was not the case. For his 50th birthday in 2003, he put on a live sex show, drawing a large crowd. Despite being in hundreds of movies, he found this to be intimidating and worried that he couldn't get it up. However, even at his age and weight, the star managed to put on a good performance, proving that he was still the king of adult performers. Even though Ron was enthusiastic about performing still, as he aged and somehow got fatter, many of the adult actresses were more hesitant to work with him or outright refused due to him being disgusting.
There were women that didn't want to do Ron Jeremy, and there was a time when it was circulated that they didn't want to do Ron because of his hygiene.
Ron didn't feel the need to change his bathing habits as he joined a college debate tour with anti-porn activist Craig Gross in the 2000s. This required the middle-aged man to be on the move constantly, going from campus to campus, proclaiming the positives of adult entertainment.
Welcome to The Standard. In Vancouver, I'm Randall Mark. Tonight, the morality of porn. One of the most prolific adult film stars in history, Ron Jeremy, debates his nemesis, the porn pastor.
After years of debating Craig, the two men soon became friends in private despite holding vastly different viewpoints on sex work. Not only is he friends with Jeremy, but allowed the actor to be around his children, having them referred to him as Uncle Ron. Even later in the adult performer's life, Craig would constantly defend him, claiming that all the sexual assault allegations were made up, but we'll get to that soon enough. Jeremy had always seen himself as the greatest supporter of the X-rated community and had constantly defended the industry since the late 80s. He would continue this work throughout the 2000s, going on Fox News to share his insights.
You want the adult industry gone completely. I mean, she's a chaplain, and from that perspective, she wants the business totally out of business.
You're a religious man. You go around the country with the church and make money off the church.
I have no problem with that. I have a lot of religious friends.
Just when you think one person couldn't take on more work, Jeremy got involved in several businesses. He started selling t-shirts and his own rum called Ron de Jeremy in 2011. It was later rebranded as Hell or High Water Rum due to the sexual assault allegations, but again, we're not quite there. He also created an adult toy molded to be an exact replica of his wiener. Jeremy also agreed to his image being used to create various gag gifs. One in particular was a wind-up toy of him kissing his nether region. Ron was on top of the world until around 2013, when his weight finally caught up to him. On January 29th, the nearly 60-year-old was preparing for a regular workday when he began to experience pain in his chest. Knowing that this is not something that he should ignore, Ron drove himself to the hospital where he suffered 2 aneurysms near his heart. He underwent a risky surgery and managed to survive the process. He promised to clean up his diet since being obese had been the main reason he had experienced health complications. Before any of this could happen, though, there were clear signs that Jeremy was having mental health issues, as he could barely stay awake, as seen here in a documentary released in 2014 called Life After the Buffet, Ron Jeremy.
Why is the green door so special?
This documentary really highlighted the decline that Ron was starting to experience, and yet he was still getting women.
It was, what's the word?
Spiritual?
Spiritual. It was a spiritual connection. And then so you're there with your friends and you said, wait right here, I'm going to go.
With these new health ailments, Ron showed no sign of slowing down.
I came in like a wrecking ball. I never hit so hard in love.
Despite acting like everything was fine by constantly traveling and staying out all nights, some in Jeremy's inner circle began to notice that there was something different about the adult performer.
But Ron, I think, you took like a nice 2-hour nap, but I think it's best if you rest a little bit more, but it's just great just to see you again.
While Ron was known for falling asleep in strange places, it was becoming more frequent and people began to joke that he had narcolepsy. His condition worsened to such an extent that he fell asleep while inside mid-intercourse. Ron never addressed this with his doctors, but had he mentioned it, they may have flagged it as a possible sign of dementia, going along with his change in speech patterns. To show what I mean, here's a clip of him speaking in 2008.
I did teach about a year and a half, special ed, and I got my master's and also got a BA in theater and education. I quit teaching to do theater.
Now compare this to a decade later in 2017.
For 3 to 4 years, it's been about 800, 900 films.
Right.
The relatively short time span between these clips demonstrates how quickly Ron's mind declined. I was actually able to track it year by year in interviews, but I felt that was a bit too in the weeds for the video. Since he did not seek help, Jeremy continued to do what he'd always done and worked in the adult entertainment space, shooting his last mainstream X-rated film in 2018, fittingly called Horny Old Men, at the age of 65. Once he retired from mainstream adult films, he reattempted to do stand-up comedy and guest appearances on a variety of different podcasts, but it was clear his mind was failing him. If this wasn't bad enough, a legal storm was brewing for the senior citizen. Starting in 2017, Kristen Brody was 22 and was working as a promotional rock girl at the Seattle radio station KISW. While there, she met Ron and alleged that he groped her breasts and buttocks, then forcibly performed digital penetration. Once he finished assaulting her, Kristen claims he said, "Did that give you goosebumps?" Realizing how irate she was, Ron immediately contacted his lawyer, who had been with him since he was arrested in the 80s on pandering charges. The attorney spoke to news outlets saying, "I don't know if he pulled her shirt down, but I know that he may have touched her breast. He may have kissed her on the back of her neck, and he's been doing this for 40 years and has never had a problem." Despite being a distasteful thing to say, at the same time the lawyer was not off base, as a typical night out with Jeremy included signing women's breasts, taking photos of him groping said breasts, and ending the night hooking up with a fan as another mindless tally to put up on his proverbial wall of conquests. When this first assault accusation came out, people began to notice Ron seemed to take liberties during these meet and greets, and while no one had ever complained before, in hindsight it was downright creepy to watch. Beyond just contacting legal support, Ron would publicly discuss the allegations, brushing them off.
Why would they accuse you? What made these...
Well, my gut feeling is, it's a money thing probably.
This was not something that was going to be forgotten, because as soon as Kristen came forward, so did another woman named Ginger Lynn. She accused Ron of sexually assaulting her all the way back in 1983.
He was just as disgusting back then as he is today. Can't say that he's my favorite person at all. He's actually, Ronnie actually me.
From here, more people began to question the beloved king of adult entertainment. Additional women began to share their horror stories with Ron on social media, even digging up old clips of his creepy nature, adding fuels to the legal fire.
At one point, you have to kind of hold your breath or black out.
He was always known to be a groper.
He tried to have sex with my friend and he tried to grab my titties.
And in 2018, he was banned from the adult video nominations.
Ron Jeremy was told he can't come.
Really?
Because of so many porn stars started complaining about harassment.
Jeremy continued to be in denial about the severity of the situation, despite the problem clearly not going away.
Ron Jeremy Hyatt is charged with forcibly raping 3 women and sexually assaulting another.
By June of 2020, Ron was arrested at a motel across from his condo in Los Angeles. When investigators looked into why Jeremy was living across the street from his house, they were disgusted to find that the dwelling was completely unlivable. Jeremy had become a hoarder and the condo was filled with trash. Many wondered if Ron was living in these conditions because he had blown all of his money, but it was soon revealed that he had a fortune of over $4 million. By October, he was facing a total of 11 counts of forcible assault, 8 counts of sexual battery by restraint, 6 counts of forcible oral copulation, 5 counts of forcible penetration by a foreign object, and 1 count each of sodomy, assault with intent to commit rape, assault with intent to commit forcible digital penetration, penetration by a foreign object on an unconscious or sleeping victim, and lewd conduct with a 15-year-old girl, involving 23 victims that span from 1996 to 2020. Jesus Christ. This is in addition to the 1983 case and the 2017 case already against him. So how did he get away with all of this for so long?
And I was standing at a mirror trying to touch up my makeup, and he came up behind me and in one swift move, stuck his hand up my skirt into me.
Well, some claim it was because he was so powerful in the space that women in adult entertainment were less likely to report assault. Interestingly enough, though, Ron may have given a hint as to why his antics were no longer tolerated.
If they want you to do something like BTS, they'll call the cops on you. I don't want to do any other scenes. That's the attitude today. They say, well, why don't you tell the person you don't want to do something?
As the world of online adult entertainment exploded, many of the ex-film actresses understood that they had more power when it came to deciding what they wanted to film and who they wanted to film with. This disrupted Jeremy's world. These women turned to OnlyFans and realized that they no longer had to film with creepy old fat guys, and that their audience of gooners honestly didn't want to see that either. While Ron was in jail awaiting trial, a documentary was released in 2022 called The Downfall of the Porn King. The 2-episode program interviewed a variety of different people from Jeremy's life, showcasing that many felt he was incapable of these alleged acts.
I never for a second in the 80s thought Ron was a predator. Pervert, yes. Predator, no.
It also interviewed some of the alleged victims of the adult actor and even questioned their stories. One of the most outspoken women, Ginger Lynn, admitted that she performed several scenes with Jeremy after the alleged assault, which occurred in the 1980s. She claims that despite not wanting to do the shoots, there was pressure from the directors, and other times Miss Lynn viewed continuing to work with him as a way to, quote, find closure. Whatever that means. The documentary also covers the declining mental health of Ron. His personal assistant, Moss Criven, drove him every night, spending 5 to 6 days a week with him. Criven alleges that Ron never did any of the accused assaults because he would have witnessed the behavior. But he does admit that Jeremy was incredibly disgusting.
One time, there was a jacuzzi in the room. He was trying to urinate into the jacuzzi. He missed. I later found out when I was checking out. It went all over my personal toiletries.
One of the most interesting stories from this series was when they interviewed Jeremy's long-term friend, Charity Carson Hawk. The woman worked in real estate and claims to never have slept with Jeremy in their 26 years of friendship. In spite of that, the last time he saw him, her opinion changed forever. He was living in a motel with prostitutes and had coaxed Charity into the bathroom, claiming he wanted to show her something. Suddenly, he slammed the door shut and grabbed her, trying to rip her clothes off. Luckily, Ron was very weak by this point, and she was able to get out of the room to report the attempted crime to law enforcement. The documentary concludes that Jeremy became more aggressive towards 2010, and this got worse as his mind declined. Through my research, I would also agree with this assessment. In his later years, Ron became more involved with prostitutes, something his younger self despised. In his book, he recalls wanting to end his life after learning the woman he hooked up with at a Charlie Sheen party in the early 2000s was hired for her services.
I'm bi-winning.
Fast forward to 2013, Ron had become close friends with Dennis Hoff, who owned the legal brothel called the Bunny Ranch.
I got my best buddy here, Joe Arpaio. Ron Jeremy's here. Come on, Ronnie.
In 2018, Ron would lose his close friend and free access to prostitutes when Hoff died at the establishment in the same room where Khloe Kardashian's ex-husband, Lamar Odom, overdosed. With the business owner dead, women who worked there began to speak out about Dennis, claiming he beat, assaulted, and forced them to work when they didn't want to. Who could imagine a pimp would do such a thing? A TV series was released about these women's experiences in 2015 called Secrets of the Bunny Ranch. Perhaps being around such an aggressive man twisted Jeremy's brain and contributed to his predatory nature. As Ron's trial drew closer, a clear pattern began to form. Nearly all of the women who accused him of assault were at a party or bar near the Sunset Strip. This timeline does line up, as there are hundreds of clips of Ron frequenting these locations on YouTube.
Oh my God, Ron, don't do that. You're going to be arrested.
That looks funny, doesn't it?
No, it looks like you're going to be arrested. Like some perverted old keeper, like that flasher.
Unfortunately, none of these women would ever receive any justice. Nearly 3 years after Ron was arrested, with over 30 cases of sexual assault against him, the court ruled that he was mentally unfit to stand trial, and therefore was never convicted of any of these crimes.
An LA judge ruled today that porn star Ron Jeremy is not mentally competent to stand trial on rape and other charges involving 21 alleged victims.
While some of these women were outraged that he wasn't going to pay for his actions, others felt that it wasn't worth making him stand trial for things he couldn't remember. In the end, Ron was released into the custody of a family member, most likely his sister Susan, but I don't know that for sure. In conclusion, I really can't help feeling anything but disgust. Sure, being a victim yourself doesn't justify bad actions, but it can lead to more understanding of how they got there. As I learned more and more about this man, I couldn't find any signs of childhood trauma to lead him down this path, as I have with many of the female stars I've covered on this channel. He was born into a middle-class Jewish family who encouraged education. His sister was a lawyer, his brother was a businessman, his cousin was a diplomat, yet he needed to buck the trend and get into pornography. While he maintained a longer career than most due to his ability to avoid drugs and alcohol, in the end the sex addiction that he refused to deal with ended up being his downfall. As he got older, fatter, and less sharp, his ability to attract women consensually waned. So to make up for that fact, he resorted to a mix of escorts and unconsenting parties to fill the bottomless void in his soul. In hindsight, Ron Jeremy would live at the Swingers Club in New York, and not just for the gluttonous devouring of the buffet and the hedonistic desire to fornicate, but also to just not be alone. He couldn't stop moving his entire life, attending parties, filming scenes, making cameo appearances, and going on tours. Also, he wouldn't be left alone with the thoughts in his head. So now he sits in a room by himself, old and disgraced, rotting away both mentally and physically, as he goes down in history as nothing more than a rapist.